begin with something stupid. So I'm talking to you. Pointless. I tell you what. But I'm a bit thirsty before I get into all this. Have a nice cold one. Oh, she's tasty. Hey, jeez. There you are. Greetings, everyone. Hankerin Ferinale here, back with Runehammer. Let's get right into it. Today we are going to be talking about dice and tools that I constantly use. So much of our time is spent talking about books and about stories and mechanics and reviews and all this kind of stuff. But underneath all of those layers is this layer right here. So before I get started, it's got to come out in the open that no matter what you are playing any given week or any given night of the week, or what your interests are, where you're headed, be they into new realms, you know, like, I don't know, Daggerheart, or even the Heart RPG I was reading today is so cool. If you're in like morborgy land, or if you're playing Fantasy Hero First Edition from 1985, like real old school because it's actually old. It could be anything that you're playing, and all of this stuff should still be just as applicable if I'm doing my job right. Even if you're playing, of course, I got to mention stuff like mine, like Crown and Skull, Viking Death Squad, Index Card RPG, and all that stuff. So I wanted to invite you into the core tools that I use and also talk about these Runehammer original dice sets. So they're really worth talking about because of the amount of work and patience that we've put into these dice has been way beyond my normal tolerances for doing anything. I like to get something started and it's done like the next week, you know what I mean? These have taken years. So on that note, let's start with the Runehammer Polyhedral set. Here's the box that they come in. And this is just a standard Polyhedral set. It's 7 dice, so you've got all your old familiar superstars from your D100, your 8, your 6, your 4, and your 12. And of course, your nice, big, oversized, chunky D20. Now, what started this is that I wanted this kind of GM-focused dice set. Not necessarily a dice set that was going to be the snazziest or the craziest looking or unique or fancy, but for a GM who's playing like night after night, sometimes in dim or low light conditions, something where it's just your go-to, it's reliable. And the inspiration that I took to make this original set, which took just over 2 years of R&D to get everything right, the feel, the mixture, the numbers, the beveling, the sizes. The inspiration really came from these little beauties here. They are the Burning Wheel dice from the Mouse Guard boxed set, which I don't think they're even included in the Mouse Guard box anymore. So they're somewhat of a rarity. I collect them whenever I find them on eBay. I have over 120 of these Mouse Guard dice, and I absolutely love how they feel, how they roll, the material, the way that, so all of those things inspired this kind of simplistic design that wound up in the Runehammer dice sets, this kind of ivory kind of material. So that's where it all began, is the Runehammer Polyhedral set. Okay, so not long after that set had gotten out into the wild and hundreds and hundreds of customers have gotten a set of these, we're really happy with how they've done for Runehammer, they're awesome. Of course, the need for more arose because we are in a Western civilization. There always has to be more. So the first thing that we've gone into, and these are all arriving right as this filming is occurring, everything is arriving from our manufacturer and getting ready to ship to everybody. But the demand for a booster set. So they're right over here. So the booster set and the GM tool set both come in one of these faux leather pouches. They're actually kind of nicer than I thought they would be. They're kind of cool, and they kind of make a happy little home. Like I often need a little home for my D20, and they make kind of a happy little home. So what I wanted to do with you guys in this video is just talk about these sets a little bit, and even more so, show you why they're so central to my kind of essential tool set that I use. All right, so let's get into how I use a bunch of my dice outside of what just the normal sort of routine of dice use for a GM may be. So first of all, why do you need so many D6s? Well, besides wargaming, I use D6s to roll my targets. So every game that has a sort of a D20 base or something similar, at least in some way, has a roll target. And let's face it, it's somewhere between 10 and 25. To get those numbers, rather than looking into my notes or looking at a book, which we'll sometimes do, we call it page to table, we'll do that on occasion. But a lot of times I will determine a target with these three handy little dudes right here. So I just do 10 plus a roll. So the easy target is always 1d6. There's a 14 target. Hard or medium, I guess, targets are 2d6 like that. So 10, there's a 19, kind of a tough roll. There's an 18. And then a hard target is 10 plus 3d6. Obviously, the top end being 28, but right there, there's a 5. So you would get a 15 target. So this can obviously be used with any combination of dice, but doing 1, 2, and 3d6, I have found, gives you a very even feeling sense of what you're hoping for as a GM. So if you're rolling a sort of medium target as a 2d6, it's actually quite unusual to be up near 20. It does not happen that much because of the bell curve and all that good stuff. You generally wind up, here's an 18, here's an 18, here's a 20. I'm undoing my own point. Here's a 16. But that's about where you want to be, 14 to 20. That's what I would consider a medium kind of roll. Now, if you're saying, whoa, in my game, that's super hard, then just dial it back. You can always change out for your D4s. So again, that's why we did the booster set of dice, so you don't have to buy a million sets to get a ton of D4s. So you could do the same thing right here. An easy is there's a 13, a medium, there's a 14, and a hard would be, there's an 18. So if that fits more of your scale, like a kind of an AD&D kind of scale, maybe of difficulty, then that might work better for you. But this is why I often need so many of a single dice type, is that I'm using D6s to roll my targets. Not to mention that if something has 39 hit points, I tend to put that 3 and that 9 out there like that. Obviously, that doesn't work for every digit combo, but it can be very handy as you're marking all kinds of things on the board. And I don't know why, but D6s are just some of the most useful number trackers that there are in all of D&D. So that's why 66 comes with the booster set. Okay, so next we've got 4D4. So D4s, I'm well known on the internet for being a huge user of D4s, and almost kind of feel like I kind of really brought them out of obscurity in some ways with all my old suspense died videos and all that kind of stuff. But I am a huge believer in the power of the D4 as a timer. So 4 rounds from now, which is quite a while in table time, X will happen. And 2 rounds from now, which is the perfect roll for most GMs and the pace that you're used to running a game, something will happen. Now, why do you need 4 of these things? 2 reasons. First of all, multiple timers. In a really fun encounter, I have found that there's going to be this many rounds until that happens, this many rounds until these guys arrive, and then there's this many rounds until this big crack opens up in the rocks over here. And I need multiple D4s, and I don't want them to be all mismatched in different colors because it can be distracting. So that's the first reason. I often have 2 to 4 timers running in a scene. The second reason is my ultra fast D&D character generation technique, which is you just take 44 and slam them down like that, assign these digits as 4 of your stat bonuses, leave the other 2 stats at +0, and your stat array is done. Now, I know that can maybe lead to a little bit more powered characters than doing something like 3d6 down the line, which is a little crazy. Another thing you can do is roll 4 stats, assign them, and then roll 2 stats as negative stats. So like, oh my gosh, -4 charisma. Is that even a thing? Nah, in our game, -1 is the deepest. So on and so on and so forth. So using D4s both as multiple timers and as stat generation tools. So that's another reason that I always have a bunch of D4s handy. And these guys are nice, big, chunky, easy to read. The faces are in sequence, and they perfectly match your Runehammer Polyhedral set. So that is the Runehammer dice booster set that you'll see that we have available. And now for the more juicy nugget, let's get into how I use the GM set. You're not my father! I told you already that I'm not your father. I'm role-playing with you. It's NPC versus DM. I know you are. Then why are you angry? Because I'm trying to get them to take the quest. And it has something to do with you not being my father. Anyways, okay, guys, let's move on from that digression and talk about these next two dice from the GM set that have become so much a part of my daily, weekly role-playing life. I don't really even know how I lived without them. And those are the directional and the yes/no dice. So the directional dice is quite obvious in its design. There's just an arrow at a random direction on each side of a D6. The first ones that I really discovered like these were the scatter die. I think it was from 3rd edition Warhammer. And they became such a part of my tool set that I had to make my own big chunky arrow die that was even simpler to read. And obviously, you roll the stinking thing to get a random direction. Now, in the old days, I used to use a D12, which is discussed in Crown and Skull too. And a D12 represents a clock relative to the GM, so a 2 is like right here. But frankly, that tiny little bit of cognitive load is way lamer. I don't know if lamer is a word, but it is more lame than rolling an arrow. And so rolling an arrow has so many uses. So many uses. Where to even begin? First of all, getting a random location. Now, I don't know about y'all, but every stinking game, I need to get a random location on a board. So if this was my board, here's how I do it. I use an arrow die and a D4. The D4 represents distance from center. So 1 is just about center, 2, 3, 4, right? Like that. Then the arrow die gives me the sort of the clock face. So there I have up-ish and 1, so it'd be like right there. Now as another exercise, let's try it again. So here we have a very different roll. So here's my center. It'd be 4, so it'd be here. So those locations, I'm generating this quickly with these 2 die. And getting random locations, no matter the size of the table or what, for me, random locations are a constant in everything I do, where things hit, where things appear, where, explosions or cracks or whatever, all kinds of stuff, where secret doors are discovered, all kinds of things. Okay, so now let's get back to this arrow die. It's not just for location, it's also for movement. Obviously, it's a freaking arrow. So arrows mean go that way. So let's say this is where a boulder has hit the scene and is now rolling. Which way is it rolling, bro? This way. And I get that answer so quickly with so little cognitive load. Which way is this boulder rolling? This way. And then you can even take this another step further by interpreting these results as being even more canonical for your scene. So in this case, it looks like the terrain has a couple of sort of descendant portions, right? Boulders roll downhill. So now we have this kind of curved downhill surface on our scene. Now that's only because I randomly rolled these, but if you wanted to overinterpret or hyper-interpret the results of an arrow die, you really could. Now another thing we'll do is selecting players. This is the best player selector die you can ever hope for. We used to use numbers and all this other stuff. We would just say, hey, who does the Lich attack? And I'll go like this. And I'll be like, oh, surprise, it's my cameraman Ryan. It wasn't pointing at him, by the way. Just no matter who I was going to point at, I was going to say it's him. So you could easily see how rolling this at a table, sitting here, it will always select a player. So if you're playing, especially with lots of players, this is really, really fast, simple way to get a random player selected. Which again, I don't know about you, but in so many games, I need to randomly pick players for different things. Let's say there's 4 people who are within the range of an attack, but I only want to attack 2 of them. How do I pick that? I give the attack a direction and interpret that as like, oh, it's like you two, rather than, oh, it's like you two. And so this just becomes so central to everything you do. And I don't mean to overstate it because I'm manufacturing these things and quite transparently selling them to you. It's just this has streamlined so many ways that I think. If you saw my old Mob the Deck video from back in COVID times, it talked about this ship that's shifting from side to side and all these mermen that are sliding around. This would be the ultimate one for a shifting ship. Which way does the deck lean? I get that way, so it goes like this. So all the players are sliding this way unless they make a dex check or whatever. which way is the tide hitting the ship? Again, I get the same roll twice. So that's a very different narrative than if I were to get sort of the reverse roll, which is where everyone slides back across again. Getting that same impact twice just sort of leans the ship further. And that detail doesn't come from me being, boy, what would be interesting in this encounter? That the ship is hit by two waves that are both large and coming from the same direction, so it leans really far. I didn't need to think any of that up. I have this little beauty doing that work for me. Okay, so obviously I'm super excited about this arrow die, and I know it's a simple little artifact, but this is the clearest, chunkiest, biggest, most lovable arrow die you're gonna find. Okay, so that's that one. So there we are there. So next, let's move on to the next most profoundly useful die you'll ever know, and it's a yes-no now, a yes-no die. If a question comes up at my table and I don't know the answer to it, and it feels important, it's got to be rolled for. So back in the day, we would just say a 1, 2, 3 is no, and a 4, 5, 6 is yes, right? So that was a no. But I can tell you, and I know you guys know how this feels, no matter how simple that rule may be, at least half the time, half the players are going to say, wait, was that a yes or a no, right? Because there's a digit transference in the brain. There's a microcognitive load, but not here. It just says yes, no on it. And these have been invented in the past by other makers that I know of. But again, I tried to do the biggest font, the clearest, chunkiest die. So is my cameraman Ryan cool? Yes. Oof. There's a 50-50 chance he was a chump there. But we use this probably just a little bit more than the directional die in any given session. And it can come to the craziest questions too, like, is the Heartfire technology basically a micronuclear reactor that makes the living androids on the planet of Atria in my new book, Hardsuit Primal? Are those Heartfires duplicatable? Can you, like a campfire, sort of spark one fire into another and therefore give life to a new sentient creature? Is that even possible? And me as the GM, I don't know. That is an insanely deep lore question. I can't be prepared for crazy stuff like that, you weird players wanting to know everything. So we'll just put it on a super high stakes yes, no answer. And if it's really high stakes, you got to have the player roll it so that you can't be held accountable. All right, so if they're really wanting to like replicate, well, this is all real, by the way. I'm not making this up. This happened in our last primal session, and they get this yes. They have unlocked this colossal avenue of story that in just one die roll, I should say, could have been completely closed off. A total narrative branch that all just came down to a yes and no. But you can also make it an insanely simple die, not for some kind of big thing, right? You can just say, hey, did I reload my crossbow quick enough to just get another shot off real fast? Yeah, sure, go ahead, right? So it can be tiny, it can be huge, but it's so literal and simple and quick to read that you get this fast reaction with the yes-no die, and it just becomes an invaluable part of any role-playing toolkit, I think. Okay, so now we got to move on to the tactics dice. All right, now that we've moved on past all that insanity, let's talk about tactics dice. So these also will come with your GM set. 3 of them will come, and this is a D6 whose 1 face is a shield, whose 6 face is an explosion. Ah, it's 6 face! And whose 2 through 5 are all swords. Now again, I wasn't born yesterday, bro. I can roll a d6 and, oh, there's a shield, right? I can do that. I can make that numeric conversion. And that's totally groovy. But I gotta tell you, I don't know if it's just because I'm like a right brain weirdo, that I have, fixation issues. But to see the icon, for some reason, spares that bit of cognitive load that just keeps me in the game. And to me, that's like huge value point, and that's why I'm so excited about these. So in Crown and Skull, all the enemies run on rollable tactics, and that keeps the GM from needing to make tactical choices with their foes. But this is applicable to any game. This can be used even if you don't have tactics listed for an enemy. The same theory still applies. And you've got 3 of them because I've found that 3 is about as many actions as an enemy can have before players start basically fainting or getting angry or feeling like it's cheesy, right? Like, oh yeah, by the way, this guy has 7 actions. You're just like, oh my God, no. So three actions is a tough foe, let's face it, in any game. So let's get back to just 1 for a minute. So we'll keep these guys over here. So here we have our hooded swordsman attacking our heroes. And I just need to know what's his kind of thing right here, right? So if I get the explosion right off the bat, that is a certain tone for this battle. That means this guy's going to do his AoE. He's going to do his like sweeping sword across the ground and splinters of rock and steel go flying everywhere. I need all my heroes to make some kind of a save or be splintered and blasted. This is a vastly different roll than if the combat is opening up and I roll this shield. So if I roll the shield, I'm going to do something more like just move into position. There you go. That's all he does, right? That kind of gives players a moment whenever that happens. Or I'll bolster. So if he wants to add to his defense, or maybe if this is mid-battle and he wants to recover some HP, that's what I do when I roll that shield, right? Like, oh man, I'm going to give him D6 hit points back as he retightens some of his armor. And they're like, no, only player characters can ever heal. If an enemy heals 1 hit point, it's heresy. Anyway, that's a digression. But normally, 4 out of 6 times, wow, math wizard over here, 4 out of 6 times, you're going to get the sword. And that just means do a conventional attack. The old bite and claw combo, am I right? So that just means coming in, attacking a player character, and rolling to hit, blah, blah, blah. So now let's get into 3 of them. This guy has now been magnified 3 times, and it's almost exponential rather than multiplicative, right? It's kind of crazy. So he has 3 actions, and I'm going to roll them just like that. Look at that, 3 swords. So what does that mean? I'll hop in, I'll do like a move attack combo, which is like in almost all games, and then he's going to go attack, 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 right? So let's rethink this narrative again. There we go. So now he bolsters to attacks, and so on. Bolster to attacks. Now here's a vastly different roll result. This is bolstering, so he gains some hit points or raises his AC by bracing, and then does 2 AoE bursts. So my whole group of players need to save all of them twice to avoid this big sort of sonic blast or fireball, whatever, right? And so even though I don't really know even who these people are, what this monster is, these help me build narrative and variation that, again, is not my responsibility, which I know that sounds kind of funny, but as a GM, I do not want to be held responsible for the action. I do not want to be the guy who came up with the thing that killed our most beloved little scamp. I will not be that guy. So the direction of things is rolled. The yes-no confirmation of ambiguous or unknown concepts is rolled. And the tactics of enemies are rolled. Now, if you don't have a bunch of interesting tactics laying around with your foe, or maybe you're playing a foe right out of like a monster manual, right? And it's not broken down into such terms, you can still generally, and if you have exceptions to this, I would like to hear them. But generally speaking, the defensive actions, the low offense actions, the shield in other words, are going to be the first ones that are going to be listed on a stat block. I don't know why this is. Maybe this is just because people are smart. But generally the AoE or the big daddy, the power attack, is going to be toward the bottom. And so you can use this die to go kind of from top to bottom in an enemy stat block if you need to save yourself some time. That can also be done with a D6, right? But again, there's something about this that is more cognitively demanding than just being like, conventional attack. Oh, conventional attack. And you will get lots of conventional attacks. But then when that AoE comes up, it's much more satisfying than how I used to do it, which my players would be watching out for 6s. They'd be like, please no 6s, please no 6s. This has much more of an emotional simplicity of not wanting to see the explosion come up. And so that's how I use tactic dice, and I hope that you find as much value in them as I do. Now, for our final piece, for the GM set, we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorites, which we've been working on for almost 7 years now, which are skull dice. They have the coolest name because anything with skull in the name is cool. You will never rule our village. We are a proto-democracy and we rebuke your yoke. No rebuke will be taken for our yoke. It's rebukeless. Dear God. Okay. Let's talk about skull dice, shall we? All right, so finally with your GM set, you're going to get 9 of these little beauties. These are skull dice. Now, all this guy really is a d6, and half the faces have a skull, and half the faces ain't got nothing, ain't got squat. All right, now what are you going to use that for, Hankerin? Like, how could this possibly be useful? Well, they are insanely useful. Now, in the beginning, I sort of worked on these and wanted to come up with these as part of my Warmaker game system. So I wanted to just get hits, basically. And this is a feature that is found in many games, to some extent in Warhammer itself, to other extents in games like Shadowrun, or basically rolling a dice pool and trying to get hits, right? So I have a 3 dice attack and I need to get a hit. You know, in some ways, even Burning Wheel has this kind of behavior, right? Oh, look, there's a hit. And the more dice that I roll, my better chance of getting 1 or more hits. That's where it all originated. But the more that we worked on these, both 3D printing them and trying to find the best way to make them, until finally only crits made the ultimate set of them, the more that we worked on them, the more uses that they organically grew, because I started having dozens, if not hundreds of them laying around. So I wanted to share with you a few of the uses that you can enjoy, as 9 of them come with your GM set. So first of all, if you're a wargamer, or if you have a large and complicated scene with lots of combatants, we use them as activation tokens. And so what that means, if like these 3 guys have taken their action, we skull them, as we often say. Like, all right, skull that guy. And especially in wargaming, let's say you have 20, 30, 40 even units. Like even playing Trench Crusade with a few factions, you can get more than 15 models on the deck. It's so handy to mark who has gone, who has done their thing. We call it sculling them. So you've been sculled, you're kind of done for this round, and we've handled your business, right? So that's the first one. Another one is just, as I mentioned, getting hits. But this could be for a simplified situation. So let's say we have 5 combatants over here and 1 over here. And I really am not in the mood to roll 5 attack rolls with different attack bonuses and all this shenanigans, right? Just to get, you know, how much damage these bandits may do against the hero. So I just roll 1 skull die for each bandit, like so. And ooh, in a brutal result, I get 4 hits. So my guy over here takes 4 damage. Now you could scale this in any way you chose. You could say, okay, it's 4 of them are successful and they each do this. Oh, again, I'm on fire, as I usually am, for 24 damage. So that's another way you can do it. You can even make this a proto yes-no die. A skull is yes, right? Oh, the answer is no. And then finally, if I don't have all my cool minis from Severed Books laying around here, I even use these for miniatures. So I only have 1 miniature handy today, and this many goblins come out, right? 5 goblins come out, and we'll just use skull dice as the goblins themselves. Now that may seem simple, but not having this tool in your box when you're out playing and then having it later, you really start to see like, man, are these things ridiculously handy. Another thing I'll use them for is a landmark. So let's say we've got a ritual that needs to be completed, and these players have distributed themselves out like this, and they each one have to fight a different merman. Because stupid mermen and their rituals. When will it stop? Enough. All right, so they're set up like this, and then this is like my totem or whatever, my weird rock that's in the middle of the scene that serves as the focal point of the sort of the ritual. Now, you're like, Hankerin Ferinale, I know you're making like a bunch of styrofoam terrain and you got a bunch of Dwarven Forge and all that stuff, but yo, you all know what's real around here. When it's happening in the heat of the moment, you don't want to dig around in like bins and look for things. And sometimes these can just be that one thing that can give you your quick answer. So I included 9 of them. 9 of them makes a good, from my experience, a good solid kit. It's not a ton. Like I probably have about 120 of them total, but about 9 is the sweet spot of where I really find myself using them the most. So that's what I included in the kit. But yeah, I think you can easily see, for anyone who plays a lot of D&D or any role-playing game for that matter, even if you're counting fear in Daggerheart, these make great fear tokens. So I just got another fear. I just got another fear. This has a good visual for players and the GM who are thinking about fear in Daggerheart, because it's like these sort of dark skull cubes, right? And it kind of has that cool thing. Like, I'm going to spend 2 fear, do 2 relentless on my Spinosaurus, get another attack out of this thing, and so on and so forth. So that is the skull dice, and they are awesome. And I think that's about everything about the GM set as well as the booster set, and how and why they came to be as extensions of the Runehammer Polyhedral set that, you know, came out, geez, over a year ago. And just why they should be at your table and how they can be at your table. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. You'll find me right here on the old internet, here in the Octagon, doing what I do. Until next time, I'm out. And out is over there. So I guess I'll head over that direction. Oh God, my bones.